Welcome to Alignment. Alignment. And the question is, what does align mean to you? That's all that matters. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton, and I am the Wisconsin State Poet Laureate and your host for today's conversation. Alignment is an opportunity to bring folks together to an unexpected conversation around one line of poetry. Somehow it seems like yesterday's rain. That's a line of poetry that our guest has been invited to ponder on, and I'm encouraged and excited to hear what stories they're going to bring to the table. Because again, what one line means to them is going to be something completely different to me, and absolutely a whole different set of wisdoms and stories from you. Hey, poetry, how are you doing? So, our guest coming to the stage, our virtual stage, please welcome Donna Neuwirth. Hello there.
Hello there.
Thank you for making time for this unexpected and very artful conversation.
We'll see.
We'll see. But I know personally, as someone who's already committed to the arts, this can go anywhere. And that's what I'm excited about, Creative Brains. So for me, this is a chance to invite folks that I have heard of, for people that I don't know at all, and a chance to go into a left turn discussion with folks I've had a chance to work with and some of my favorite people about the state. And you are absolutely on that list. So I know how great you are. So why don't you do me a favor and tell the people, who are you?
My name is Donna Neuwirth, and my job is I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Wormfarm Institute in rural Reedsburg, Wisconsin. Our mission is to integrate culture and agriculture along the rural-urban continuum.
Now that's an interesting intersection. So just like an intersection, were you traveling on one road and then something else came and crossed that path? Or was this intersection the vision that you had from the start?
No, it was a stumbling into a new direction for my partner, Jay Salinas, the co-founder, and I. So we are former urban people that have been deeply embedded rural residents for almost 30 years now.
So it's almost, you say former urban people. Is there a 12-step conversation we need to have? I mean, what was...
No, I'm not sure. I still am that person, but I reside in among more plants and animals than people.
Oh my. Well, tell us a bit, where you're from and how you got to where you are now.
Well, I just happen to know that you and I have similar growing up. I grew up in a military family. And so I was formed by Europe and both coasts, and just almost accidentally wound up in the Midwest. So yeah, I'm homeless and at home everywhere.
That's the only way I can explain it to people as well. You know, you're just used to P.O. boxes and roller bags. And what we talked about before, what I loved about this growing up is it's not a tolerance for people, right? It's genuinely an appreciation for all the ways that there are to people. When you grow up and you move around, and not just about seeing other cultures, but literally you at a different school and different neighbors and the different way the folks across the street do birthdays.
Right.
What are some of I guess one of the gifts for you when you think about your upbringing as a military kid?
Well, I think you only think of that in retrospect when people go, what? When people are surprised that you went to 13 schools, for example. And it wasn't a surprise to me. That was my life. But I think I have a kind of a maybe hyper adaptability, always ready for the next thing.
Yeah. Do you think because of that moving, or that helped you with the moving?
I don't know. I really don't know. I do remember a moment, probably my first memory of moving. We lived in a town in France, and we were told we were moving back to the States. I was probably 6 or 7. And I remember not waving to my best friend out the window because somehow I had hardened my heart and had already said goodbye to her. And I remember that vividly. I did not look at her.
That's how I'm going to deal with this. If I just look away, it's not going to hurt as much, and maybe it'll go away.
Yeah.
I hope we grew out of that.
It was okay after that, but that first time, yeah, it was. I didn't know how else to deal with it.
How now, as we're all fully grown up, how is it about people moving in and out? So especially you have with your work dealing with artists and projects and, collaborators, they're here and then they're not, and they come back and then they don't. So are any of those vestiges leading, shape how you work with the fluid of people in and out of your life?
That's an interesting question. It feels very seasonal to me. People are seasonal, and we have a season of vegetables and people, and then a quiet season of books and no people. And I really welcome that kind of coming and going. And that's something that now that we live on a farm and we actually farm, it's interesting how the human component of who we share our time with follows that exact same season.
Interesting. And I was at a conference some years ago, and in between the breakouts, a group of us, hey, let's go grab some lunch together. And there was a woman, her discipline was theater. And I'm squinting. It was a fringe theater, so not traditional pedestrian. I call it pedestrian theater. That would most people would imagine. But as a creator, she talked about how she now works everything in cycles, to where there's a cycle to her week, there's a cycle to her month, there's a cycle to the year. So she found that instead of making herself try to create and write and edit all year round, it's more difficult in the fall. So the fall was her research and dreaming and a lot of staying inside cocooning. And then the spring was when she created, the summers when she traveled. And I thought, I was like, and it's natural. We operate in cycles, and we, as super smart mortals, we work against that natural rhythm. So just curious to hear you talking about the seasons, especially as working with the land is now part of your season. What do you find that your work?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because the word season, I was most comfortable with when I was actually in the theater. The theater season, I'd never thought of it in terms of the weather changing until, of course, you're immersed in a farm life. And now, but it's very similar cycles. The text that you take in the theater and bring to life, and in farming, it's the land, and the text is the land. You bring the life out of the land. And so those cycles are actually the same. I just had never thought of it that way.
Is it? Just keep waking up every day. The world will teach you something else.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I don't remember about you, Donna. Do you also create plays? So tell me about your creating life.
Interesting, because the line of poetry made me think of something in my far past. The theater part of my life is way in the past. But how we talk about our work, it's very much social sculpture, which is sort of creating an environment in which to invite people to, which is very much like the theater. You're inviting people to this thing that has been somewhat curated, but there's also other kind of accidental and natural things happening within it. And the line of poetry reminded me of how I tend to talk about that very far away past of my life as feeling like the past of someone else's life.
Oh my! Well, tell us a little bit more where this poetry line took you then.
Well, because somehow it seems like yesterday's rain. Whoops. That's what I thought of because of the yesterdays that form our todays. And specifically, I've always found it kind of awkward because people tend to kind of pick up on the theater part because it seems so contradictory to what we're doing right now. And when I think about that part of my life, it feels very distant. And yet it's the distance things that have formed us. the growth that is happening now is because of yesterday's rain. And
It is
so
the
that's how I think about it.
Oh, it is the distant things that form us. Huh. I learned, I was visiting a friend. She says, "You want to come hang out with me in the country?" Yes. And so we were having this conversation that only someone who works and lives in the land and is that close. And we were talking about it was snowing. It was this late spring snow. And she says, "Well, actually, I'm glad that it's finally snowing because I know the farmers need the snow." So of course and so she explained the whole deal that it captures the moisture, it keeps it in the ground, and the roots
Right.
need it. Things that all I know is just it's a blight across the asphalt, um, right? When it's not pretty anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
just that idea of what that is storing. So I go to that visual of what the ground is storing for later.
Yes.
So these lessons that we didn't know were being stored in our muscle memory,
Mm-hmm.
what to do or what not to do. Wow, we are shaped by our yesterdays. And that gives it a lot of grace for some of those yesterdays that don't feel like they could have been a gift at all.
Right.
The mistakes and the stumbles and the
Mm-hmm.
disappointments, but those are also part of what got us here.
Yeah.
So maybe even yet shaped by yesterday's storms in some cases too. Oh, so does that what do you think most fondly on when you think back to those distant days of theater?
Well, just that I think it kind of put in, again, your phrase, your muscle memory, that there's a time and a season for what you do. And so this is the time for learning the lines.
Hmm.
And then the next time is the time for allowing that to become something that can be communicated to others. So I think that just set up the rhythm of what ended up being farming and then doing major public events in rural America where we asked people to come and take this journey through farm country. And
Mhm.
I think that the most important part of that is the invitation to come closer, because when you're invited, you are saying, "Oh," and then you have your eyes open and you're curious. And so I think it's that sense of the theater as being something you've practiced and practiced and it is ready, and then you invite people in to share it. So I think that is very much what we do now, although I don't think of it that way.
These wisdom
Until
just
now.
everywhere, just laying in plain sight. So tell us a bit about what it is you do. So give us a description of some of the worm farm work. And
Okay.
I especially love, even though I know what those projects, those initiatives are, having literally these seedlings of seasoning, of connecting your past with a now purpose, and this huge concept of invitation.
Mm-hmm. Well, the most public program we do is called the Farm Art Detour, and it's a 50-mile self-guided drive through the scenic working farmlands of Sauk County, Wisconsin. And it is punctuated by temporary art installations, site-responsive art installations that last 10 days and then they go away. But also roadside poetry and what we call field notes, which are signs in the landscape that help people understand dairy or hay or corn. And then local food and gathering places throughout. So it's this almost like a treasure hunt that serves the people who have grown up there all their lives. Allow that kind of moment when you follow a map and you go to stop number 2, 3, 4, 5 to
Mhm.
see your own home through a different lens, as well as inviting people from elsewhere, especially cities, to come closer to the landscape that we all depend on. And then the best part of it is these chance encounters with each other. So people who have lived there all their lives and people who are driving in from Chicago for one day and wanted to know what this thing is. And so this sort of shared space in this landscape that is permanently important but changing.
Hmm.
And we need to bring back our urban audience. We do 80% of the eating of anything that a farmer grows. And so these relationships need to be strengthened through sensual pleasure
Mhm.
and food. And so this invitation to take this drive in the country and get out of the car and accidentally bump into some of your neighbors you didn't know you had have been very rewarding and have led to more kind of permanent opportunities to gather together, especially at this time when the rural-urban divide, whether actual or perceived, can be dangerous.
Very true. And I would imagine, what are English? When you get the urban folks out of their car and they accept the invitation to, I like that, to get closer, to lean in closer. And of course, there's not going to be an exact same response, but I'd imagine there's a pretty similar theme of why it's important, why they realize it's important for them to have leaned into this food source.
Well, we actually hope it's more of an individual discovery, just like the line of poetry. Everybody will respond differently. And so one of the ways we explain it, after having done it for 9 years now, is some people come for art and trip over farming, and some people come for farms and trip over art, and each experience is somehow enhanced by the other. But you may have no interest in either of those things, but the excuse to go for a drive in the country and wondering what everybody else is paying attention to narrows your focus, and you go, what is that? And you see something you didn't see before. It's just natural.
What do you still love about it?
That happens year after year, and we hear about it from different people. And I think it's a kind of a natural impulse. I mean, if you're walking down the street of a town where you're visiting, you don't know anybody, and there's a rainbow, all of a sudden you're going to grab whoever's next to you and go, look, there's a rainbow. So I just think we're at our best when we're recognizing something that's wonderful and we want to share it.
Oh, whether you know that person or not.
Yeah. So I think it's creating a format, a loosely curated format where those kinds of things can happen. They don't always happen, but they can happen.
And on the other side, where this is your home landscape, right? So you're used to seeing the fields and the silos. So what is the sense of awe? I mean, I know the art, but the experience for the folks where this is where they are every day. I
think we all of us get inured to the beauty around us. And it happens in cities too, of course. But then you bring in Aunt Mabel and you show her around, then you notice again your own place because you're showing it off. And because you're seeing all these other people oohing and eyeing, and then you're going, oh yeah, I really do live in a beautiful place. Or this really is important, this work that farmers do every day. And the fact that they're sometimes invisible to people, we want to raise their visibility.
I appreciate that. And I know for me, I've been in those conversations, and my first response is, well, I don't know anything about growing anything. I eat, yes, but why would I? Oh, because I eat. And I found asked and answered was the question. And it really
also wear clothing.
Yes. Yeah. And it was really compelling to be reminded how those conversations are shaped outside of us, right? So I'd already dismissed myself in the discussion, one, because I don't grow things. And on the other side, I'm not technically a land activist. And it felt like there was nothing in the discussion. I thought there would be nothing in the discussion for me to learn or contribute. And both of those were incorrect. So I personally appreciate it. I know I'm that person who could stand to really pause. And we're often told to think about the Food Network in we need to save it kind of a way, in an activist kind of a way, in a you need to put up a raised garden bed in your backyard kind of a way. Yes, to all of those things, but just being invited in the conversation. And like you said, being curious about the folks, the actual people, the families, the humans that raise and make and produce our food just adds to, the appreciation. I don't have to become a farmer. I don't have to start, gathering my own honey by any stretch. So it's more than just learning about how food is made. I think that's the shorter version, but just that there is a process and there's a synergy between the folks who eat and the people who make sure that happens.
Right. And it's permanently important, and it's always shifting how land is used and how farming takes place. And especially now, because of all the climate change issues and the role that farmers can play to either help or hurt that process, it's getting even more interesting, and there's more at stake. And we are lucky in this state because it has an agricultural identity, and there's still a lot of beautiful farmland that farmers are still eking out a living. But if urban folks and our neighbors don't care enough to keep that productive farmland productive to keep us fed and clothed, then I think, we will suffer the consequences.
What is on one parting note, a bit of advice or a request, or what's a note, like a starter tip for someone who's listening going, oh, I never thought of that. I don't know what I would do to be helpful to the farmers. What's something that people could do?
I think just go out, take the detour, take a drive in the country, and see the variety of the kinds of farms there are right in central Wisconsin. I mean, it's remarkable how we can go 20 miles in any direction and go through different hillsides. And it's not just dairy and corn and beans. There are small little Amish farms and small vegetable farms. But it's mainly the fertile landscape that can play a role in getting out of the dependency on commodity crops. And I don't want to get into that because it gets really technical and I'm not the best person to talk about that. But taking a drive in the country, I think, is underrated.
Agreed. And in commodity crops, I'm glad that you said it, because when I think of a farm, I think of Old McDonald, right? Not Old McDonald Incorporated with the industrial look to it. So many people may have blocked what actually can happen in farming, and we've replaced that kindergarten version of what farming looks like. So to go out into the country, be reminded that that's ideal.
Well, it's the whole spectrum. It's everything from Old McDonald to CAFOs with 10,000 cows. And so there's a huge spectrum of how your food can come to you. And ultimately, the people who live in cities vote with their dollars as to what that choice is. And of course, policy plays a very important role. But that's not our role. Our role is for this kind of sensual invitation to come closer, because in order to love something, you got to care. In order to care, you got to know. In order to know, you got to be first introduced. So we think of ourselves as more of the introducers, and others can take it from there.
With artistic flair, flair.
Whatever it takes.
Most excellent. Well, I want to thank you for making time out for this conversation and introducing us and me to a little bit more, and the people that are viewing, just to what you do, how you got there, and definitely how this line of poetry reminds us, man, I love that. Yesterday's rain is our yesterday's us, and we are fertilizing our next. Oh, you poet, you poet, you. So I'm going to go and I'm going to share the actual poem that this comes from. And I'm going to put this information up one more again so folks can make sure you take a visit to wormfarminstitute.org and check out the detour and all of the programming that we have coming up. Donna, thank you for making this time today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So our line that we started with today was, somehow it seems like yesterday's rain. And I love this idea that this rain are our experiences, and our past is what nourished us to be here in this moment. So the actual poem is called Retirement, and it is from Bruce Deathlifson. It's raining right now. Sometimes it seems like yesterday's rain. Somehow exactly the same. The very same rain as rained yesterday. This rain coming down is yesterday's rain. Exactly the same exact rain as came yesterday. This rain, the same, this very rain, same, rain. You're the same, but refreshed. And we're glad that you are here. Thank you for taking time to listen to these stories. And we hope that you will check out the next alignment. And remember, what the line means to you is an invitation to hear what someone else thinks and what their story may be. Have an incredible, incredible week.